Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. We're going to discuss the concepts of health, wealth, leadership, and legacy. My name is Chad Hyams, and I'm your host, joined here by my co-host, Bob Stewart. Say hi to the people, Bob.
People.
On this episode, we're going to have a conversation with Ben Kinney, where we're going to discuss the fiduciary duties of a leader. Now, Bob, what should everybody be listening for on this episode?
I think the thing that jumped out at me is where's your DNA on the bad hires that you've made, right? And if you're leading people or you have a business, you've probably had some bad hires, right? And a lot of times we think like, that person, right? But you have DNA on that situation, and so I'd encourage you to be paying attention to what are those, those couple of duties that he's going to tell us about, and then really be thinking back, like, where's your DNA on a lot of the bad hires you've made in your career? So, Ben, we have this concept of leadership and the duties of a leader, and there's a few things that, sometimes your people just fail because they fail, right? But often we've found that we have DNA on that failure, right? So you created this idea of what the duties of a leader are. First, just why? Where did this come from originally? And then we'll kind of get into what those are.
I remember I lucked out. My very first hire was Jolene, and she turned out to be a great hire. But I had many hires after that, and some of which weren't great hires. And I started looking around and seeing myself pointing the fingers and saying, hey, this person is failing in the role. I should get rid of that person. But I immediately felt guilty every time I had to do that, because I was walking in there and saying, you no longer have a job. But I realized that the reason that they were there was because I was the one that hired them, right? Maybe it was my bad for bringing in the wrong person to the wrong seat on the bus, or maybe it was my bad because I didn't set them up for success in the role. And I never wanted somebody else's life to be negatively impacted by something that I caused. So I started asking myself the question, what is my role in leadership, and what is my role as their boss? What are my duties, so to speak? So I came up with that concept of the fiduciary duties of a leader.
And we're sitting here talking about this so we can say fiduciary duties. When we have to write it out on the board, we call it just the F duties, right?
Because I can't spell for shit.
So we're fine here with no whiteboard to draw on. So,
yeah.
Okay, so fiduciary duties of a leader. And I think if you don't have enough people's lives kind of in your hands, you maybe never realize this, right? You never realize how important your role is in it. But when you've seen multiple people coming through and maybe not working out, right, all of a sudden you had to assess, like, maybe it's not them, maybe it's me, right? So what are your fiduciary duties to your people?
I took some time to think about it, because I try to create everything into a model or a system, something that I could teach to my other leaders that are in our world. So I came up with three, and maybe we'll just start with the first one. But the first duty of a leader is to clearly set the standards and expectations for what that person needs to succeed in the role. As I first started thinking about this concept, is you feel like everybody in your world has 100% clear thought of this is what I have to do to succeed, but it's not true. And the reason is us leaders, is we go in there and we dump another thing on them. We give them a list of things. We give them an idea. We get a bunch of crazy ideas every single day, and we keep putting ideas and ideas, and they get overwhelmed. So not just that we need to provide clear standards and expectations for them to succeed, is how do they succeed in their top 20%? What are the most important things that they need to do to be successful in the role? And our job in the very first interview is to say, I want to be real clear that success in this role is you doing these things. In the next interview, success in this role, I don't know if I mentioned it the first time, is you doing these things.
So it's not like that list of things you'd say, like you're putting your job out there, and it's here's 70 things you got to be able to do for this job. It's prioritizing what are those things that, like, if you don't get these done every day, today was a failure, right? It's prioritizing those.
So how you know that is you go and you say, I'm going to hire for this position. Maybe I'm going to hire my first assistant or a manager or whatever this role for your company would be. Make a list of the 20 things that they would have to do in that job. And then put them in order to say, if everything was on fire, what would the fire you'd want them to fight first is? And then have them, you put those things in order all the way through 20. and then take a pen and cross out everything below 5, because that's what you're hiring for. As you go through and you're setting these standards and expectations, you got to reiterate it. You reiterate it in the first 2 interviews, the day before you make the offer, the day you make the offer, their first day at the work, their second day at work, their third day at work, their second week. You continue to reiterate the standards and expectations for them to be successful in their role.
So this doesn't just need to be an employee. I mean, you're talking, this could be a babysitter you're hiring for your kids, or a dog walker that you're hiring, or a cleaning person that you're hiring. You're going to come up with a list, and then you're going to basically be able to narrow it down in order of priority and say, as long as they're getting these things done, I'm happy with the job they're doing, and as long as they're clear, these are the things that need to be done.
Yeah. I read a book once, and it said, people don't disappoint you. Your expectations for them disappoint you. And I think a lot about that idea of how is my expectations, which are not clearly defined, explained, and reiterated to people, setting me up to be disappointed in somebody, and they probably had no idea.
Yeah. Wow. I think we have that. Any interpersonal relationship,
Absolutely.
you have that, right? I come to the table, I know Chad, and I'm like, he should act a certain way because that's what I expect of Chad, right? But Chad's like, you never told me that, Bob.
I didn't know my sneakers were supposed to be that white and clean and supposed to carry baby wipes for that stuff.
Yeah.
You didn't set that standard and expectation. So that was number 1.
Yeah.
Okay. What about number 2?
Okay, so we've told them what we expect from them. Now what?
Yeah, we've clearly set their expectations and standards for them to succeed in their 20%, the most important things. Number 2, do we inspect what we expect? Are we in there on a regular basis seeing, are they actually doing the activities? And I don't mean walking by. I mean, if it's a salesperson, listening to them do their presentation, listening to one of their phone calls, making sure that they're making enough dials, right? If they're building something, it means looking at the widget and inspecting it. It's making sure that from day one, it's being done to your standards and to your expectations. Now, it's not micromanaging them. Micromanaging is when you jump in the middle and you try to help them do everything. And you aren't inspecting and jumping into every single thing they do. You're saying, what's the most important thing for the role? And you're going to help them be really awesome at that. You do that by continually looking at their activities and inspecting those standards and expectations that you set for them in number 2. And you see this as a failure in leaders is because they go by, they say, here's your job, Chad, and then they throw you the job, and then they come back 6 months later and they're frustrated and they say, hey, Chad isn't getting enough sales, or Chad isn't doing this, making enough widgets, or whatever that might be. Now it's Chad's fault, right? And they jump in there like the seagull thing, and they jump in, they poop on that person, and they fly away again, right? No, it's about walking hand in hand with that person until they're doing it at your level or better. And that's the leadership job, is be willing to commit the time to spend with each person.
So what is that time? Is it every day? Is it once a week? Is it like depending on the job? Does it change over time?
Yeah, here's how I'd explain it would be, when we get into business together, Bob, on day 1, I'm going to be checking in with you about every hour. And you're going to be checking in with me. You're going to be telling how things going, right? We're going to talk a lot. On day 2, that's still going to happen. And in day 3, it's still going to happen. After a while, we're going to start checking in with each other probably twice a day. And after a while, we're going to start checking in with each other once a day. And after a while, Bob, we're just going to talk once a week. And after a while, we're just going to talk once a month. And then we're going to talk once a quarter. And then you're probably going to be running this company. Isn't that cool?
And I'll have earned that over time, right?
Yeah.
It's Bob earning that right. It's not you just backing off and saying, hey, you got 3 days and I'm slowing down. He's proving to you don't need to be in touch with him as often.
You ever heard that analogy, Chad, of how many adjustments a rocket has to make on its way to the moon?
No.
It's something like, I don't know, it's a big number, 1,000 or 10,000 little adjustments that the rocket has to make in order to stick on the trajectory of making it to the moon. Now, what it looks like from a distance is the rocket is going straight to the moon, right? But in this situation, what I'm saying is that we're both rockets, and we're both trying to get to the moon together, and I'm willing to make all these little micro adjustments so that we can stay in parallel in flying to the moon.
The interesting thing about that is, and you think about like bringing somebody into your organization in the beginning when they really need it the most, right? Those little micro adjustments, because a rocket going to the moon, if it's off just a a tenth of a degree or whatever early, you're going to miss the moon by a long ways later.
Good point.
Right? So making those adjustments early is really important, because just a small off over a long period of time can really miss our mark.
Yeah, you don't want to be going like this, zigzagging across success in the role, right? You want to keep them together. You want to be bringing them together as fast as possible. And the only way to do that is to be constantly inspecting what you expect, to make sure that you're doing your duty as a leader and you guys are both going together on that journey to the moon.
We see this all the time in our own business, when we're working with other people in their business. I don't have the time for this. Like, where do leaders find the time to do that?
Most leaders have the time. However, the way they spend it is they hire somebody, they let them fail, and then they spend a week or two trying to find somebody new. And then they spend a week or two trying to train somebody brand new, and they go through this cycle, thus taking up 10 times the amount of time. Now, it doesn't actually take that much time. It takes, hey, Bob, how you doing? How'd you do yesterday? What was your biggest win? How'd you fail? Right? What can I do to help? That's 3 minutes or 5 minutes. And then sometimes it's, hey, Bob, I know you have a sales presentation today. Could I sit in on it with you? Hey, let me hear you make a call. Hey, Chad, let's role play real quick. It's just jumping in and out. It's not going in there all the time and doing their job. You need to hire people that are willing to take the ball and run with it. You're just saying, I got your back and I'm going to block for you, right? I'm going to be a part of that. Look at me doing a sports analogy.
Make a note of this somewhere.
Well, and it's a priority, right? Like, as a leader, you said, I've brought this person into my world. It's got to be a priority to inspect what I expect from them.
In fact, I would say it's a fiduciary duty.
Oh, there we go again.
Right? It's something that you owe that person.
Yeah.
So number one was you're setting those standards and expectations very clear, their top 20% and everything expected of them.
Yep.
Number two, we're inspecting what we expect from them.
Yep.
Number
On
three,
a regular basis.
on a regular basis, okay? And number three,
We have to provide the coaching, training, and mentorship for them to be successful in the role. Meaning, we can't just go in there and say, "Hey, you gotta go sell 20 widgets," and check in every day and say, "Hey, Chad, how many did you sell?" And then he doesn't ever sell any widgets, and we don't go back in and say, "Well, why is that?" We got to provide people the tools to be successful.
And this comes out of your inspecting what you expect from them, right? Because when you're in there kind of following along, you realize, Chad's a little bit weak on his widget pitch.
whoa now.
That's why I love a leader that has actually done the job of the people that they're hiring. And there's some exceptions for that. Like, I'm not super good at spelling or numbers or accounting, so I hire people that haven't done, but I'm willing to sit in there with them and learn. In the beginning, because I built a business out of really sales and running businesses, is I would go in there and I would train somebody to be successful in sales while they sat there and watched me. And then I would go in there and I would teach them what I just did. Over time, I got smart about it, and I said, well, I'm just going to put a camera up. And I put a camera up, and I recorded myself doing my sales presentation, and then I had it transcribed from a virtual assistant somewhere, right? And then I had it written, and then I had the video, and we took the audio of it, and I put it into CDs back in the day when people had CDs, right? And they had all the tools for them to know how to do that particular thing. So what I would do is I would go back, reset the standards, and say, hey, Bob, I expect you to spend the time to master this presentation and to do it the exact same way that I do. And then I would go inspect that Bob was doing the presentation the exact same way as me by role playing, right? Or by watching him actually do it with a potential customer. And I would make corrections if he was going off script. The third thing that we talked about, training, coaching, providing models, systems, that sort of thing, right, requires you to do 1 and 2 over and over again.
Yeah.
You'll find that over time, that when you think smart about it, I didn't ever have to train that thing again because I already videoed myself doing it. My job was to continue to make those resources or find those resources outside of my company so that the person had the tools to succeed. Like, I pay for our accounting department to take tax classes or to take accounting classes, or for our software developers to take additional training or to go to conventions. I'm always trying to provide them tools to be better in their job when I can't provide that tool. Now, what I found is that if I do all 3 of those things and the person is still not succeeding in the role, I actually feel okay moving them to a different role or parting ways with them. But if I didn't do all those 3 things, I will go back and say, hey, this is on me, Chad. I'd like to apologize that we had got into business together and we started working on this thing, and for whatever happened, for whatever reason, we haven't been successful. And I want to take full responsibility for that, Chad, and I want you to know that this is on me. Would it be okay if we started over tomorrow with a brand new plan and we worked together for the next 30 days to get our ships back on track to go to the moon? And I would sit down and I'd say, great, here are the standards. Here are my expectations. Here's how you're going to see me show up every day, every hour, every week for the next month. And here is the training that I think you need. What do you think you've been missing so far? And I'll give that person that extra chance, because I don't want to part ways with somebody when their failure in the role was on me. A lot of other leaders don't understand that their decisions to part ways with employees destroys lives, destroys families, destroys finances. It affects children, and if they can eat and rent and mortgages and all those things, and that breaks my heart.
And it ripples too, right? Like if you continuing to have this problem, all of a sudden, especially, if I'm in a business in a small community, all of a sudden, like, you don't go work with that guy because,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, and you see it too. You see it in the leader, like, yeah, there's no good talent around here, right? I can't find anybody good. That person wasn't good. That person was lazy or whatever it was. And then that person goes and works for your competitor, and they start killing it, because that competitor was providing the fiduciary duties of a leader. Now, let's say that I got through this and I'd done all those 3 things, and that person still is failing in the role.
Right.
I'm going to feel okay parting ways.
Now, how many chances are you going to give them? You said you're going to have that conversation. You're going to take responsibility. You're going to say, let's do this again for 30 more days. Is it 3 strikes, they're out? Is it 3rd time's a charm? Is it just twice that we're giving them, and if they're not showing up after those 30 days, now you're okay parting ways?
Yeah, I'm probably going to be okay parting ways with them, Chad. The first thing I'm always going to ask is there a different seat on my bus that I could help them move to? Because I don't want to affect people's lives, and I was the one that hired them. I need to start thinking. The other thing I might do, Chad, would be I might write them a large severance check. Now, people think about severance checks as gifts to the employee, and here's where I've changed it in my mind. A severance check is a penalty that I write to myself for me not following the process of hiring or me not doing my fiduciary duties as a leader. So when I write a severance check, I'm being generous to the person. I'm punishing myself for not delivering on my duties or not following the hiring process, which we try to enforce.
Interesting.
That's interesting. I don't know if I heard somebody think about it that way before.
Sure. It's an interesting. So what you're saying, and this will probably be a whole other episode on its own, this is somebody you've already hired.
Yeah.
There is a whole process before you'll hire anybody to make sure you're bringing the right person in, so you're willing to find that right seat on the bus if you had the wrong seat, because you know you found at least talent in that person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
If we do the duties and we continue to try to improve, you're going to end up with a really big organization filled with people that are really loyal because they know that you gave them chances, right? That it's going to attract lots of other people to your world and to your company because everybody else is talking about, hey, it's really great to work with Bob and Chad, right? They really treat people good, right? And even if they do leave, they say, yeah, I worked with Ben, it didn't work out, but he still treated me really good.
Sure.
And that's the reputation we want, right? To make sure that people know that no matter what happens, they're going to be treated okay, and they can move on to whatever their next opportunity is.
F duties.
F duties. I want to put you on the spot. How many people do you think you're leading right now?
I think we're influencing thousands, Chad. I think employees and contractors are in the upwards of 2,000. Directly reporting to me is a little bit more than it should be, 30 to 40.
Okay.
But there's a lot. And I wake up every single day with a thought in my mind, how do I earn the right to stay in business with each and every one of these people?
You're not leading all of them. You're teaching your leaders those same 3 duties that they owe to the people that are following them, which are ultimately following you in the path.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this: if I'm watching this today, I'm listening to this today, and I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, I haven't done this. Like, I've just been. You talked about reestablishing, those things with somebody. But if I've never done this before, what does that look like? Is that just is that another apology? Hey, I'm really sorry. I've just been a horrible leader to you. Like, where do I do with somewhere I'm just going, I've never done any of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what I'd do is I'd first sit down with some quiet time by myself. I always do it with a Sharpie and a piece of paper. And I would sit down and I'd write down the role, not the person. And I would go and I'd say, here's the role of this. And what is their priorities? And then I'd put them in order. And then I'd circle the top 5. Because if you've never done this, Bob, you've probably not taken the time to figure out how somebody would succeed in the role. And then I would write down a plan for inspecting what I expect. What could I do to see that they're doing those activities or working on those priorities? And I start making a list. I'm going to get a CRM, or I'm going to have them report their appointments or their activities, or I'm going to have them turn in their work, or they're going to turn in a priority sheet every week or something like that. And then I start making a list. What do I think that they haven't been trained on? What support do they need? What tools do they need, right? What person? Do they need a coach, right? And I start coming up with a plan. And then when I go to sit down with that person, I already have a rough draft for what needs to happen first. And then I'm just going to talk about that specific person and how I can do it. And the only way to do it is to just sit down and do it. Just have a couple conversations, screw it up.
Well, so this applies, I think, to anybody leading people. We lead people generally in the real estate arena, right? And so, what do you think this will expose? Like, should you even be leading people, right? Because, like, if I don't have a system and a model around something, and I'm just, and I'm bringing people into my business because I have leads for them to call or whatever it is, right? Like, don't you think this is going to expose people to be like, I shouldn't really even be leading anybody?
I think if anybody can be a leader, the question is, are you willing to invest the time to do the fiduciary duties of a leader or not? And if you're not willing to actually do it, you probably shouldn't be leading somebody. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have a big life. Maybe you need to hire somebody that could actually do that. But I don't think you have the right to continue to disrupt people's lives or affect people or hurt people or have that churn in your business and in your business world unless you're willing to commit to doing those 3 things.
It feels like if you're not doing those things, like you said, you get churn, you get chaos. I don't know how you build momentum without really being that effective leader.
That's why so many people fail when they try to grow a business super fast, is you can't possibly hire talent, train talent, hold talent accountable, right? Create all the standards and expectations and models and systems super fast. It takes time to implement these things. That's why really successful companies look like this and then like this. When companies try to look like this right off the bat, you'll see that it actually ends up looking like this, and many of them never recover from one of those downfalls.
And you've had that in your own businesses before, right? You've grown a bunch and then leveled off, and then
Yeah.
Let's look at your business. Give us a story specifically of someone who that taught you this lesson. I mean, there's got to be somebody, you don't have to use their name, of course. There's got to be somebody that you had hired, that you looked up, you created turmoil by letting them go or whatever had to be done in the situation before you had these steps in place. Is there someone that comes to mind to you? And share the story with us of what was the awakening that made you say, I got to create these fiduciary duties to lead people properly.
I would say the best example of that, Chad, is when you are sitting in a room with one of your best buddies, right? People you've known for years or lifetimes or whatever it is, and you're sitting across them and you're having a conversation about this working together isn't working out. And you realize that if you aren't careful, you're not just going to lose an employee, but you're going to lose a friend. Mm-hmm. And then you start looking in the mirror a little bit and you start saying, that person's failure is actually my fault. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And I think this person's actually really talented and smart and hardworking. And you start realizing that this one's on me. And I don't know if I could give you a specific instance, Chad, but I could give you about 10 of them. These are 10 different people that I brought into my world that at some point in their career, they were not succeeding. And I realized that was my fault. And I had a choice. Do I restart or do I part ways and potentially end a friendship? And I was willing to give it another try.
A lot of people do this. If you're somebody that can create opportunity, right? And like you've been an opportunity creator, I think. Then you say, well, I want to bring people into this, right? I want these people to have the same opportunities. But if you don't have standards, you don't have the way things are done. You're not actually leading them. You just kind of essentially lead them to slaughter, right? You're like, hey, there's opportunity over here. Come drink from it. And they're like, what? Where do I go? And they're just
Some leaders are they're given this gift of charisma. Right?
That's not you, bud. Sorry.
That's actually kind of true. They're given this ability to sell, or this ability to attract people, or this ability to generate relationships, and they're so good at that they can create a really big world really quick, but they haven't started working on these other skills, their leadership skills and their accountability and all these other things that make them a really great business owner, and then it falls apart. And because of that, all those people that you're able to attract to your world leave. And it harms a lot of people. I always say that you can judge the quality of a leader by how long the longest person has been following them and how many people follow them. Somebody says, hey, I'm a great leader. Great, who are you leading? Well, I mean, I could be a great leader. Well, that's a more accurate statement because there's actually nobody following that person. Or if I say, I'm a great leader, look at all these people following me, and I say, well, great. How many people are following you? Like, I got 10. That's amazing. How long has the longest one been following you? Well, about a year. Well, what happened to everybody you brought last year? Well, they're not here anymore. They weren't talent. They weren't accountable. They weren't whatever. And you start realizing, no, they can't all be bad, right? You got to fix this before you can fix that.
Yeah.
What a great statement right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So F duties, go figure it out, right? Understand what they mean for you, right? And then these are gonna be different for everybody. You probably lead differently with those F duties today than you did a year ago, than you did 5 years ago, right? You have different caliber of people, different roles. But you have to nail this.
No choice.
Wow. That was amazing. I mean, I love listening to Ben. He shares great lessons, and it doesn't matter how many times we hear it, you're always in a different place, so you pick up something different. So, Bob, let's put you on the spot. What's that one thing you took?
And I've heard this one before, right?
Sure.
This isn't the first time you or I have heard him talk about your fiduciary duties. And like you just said it, like I'm at a place where like right now, I have an employee right now, somebody that works for me that I'm responsible for leading. And I haven't been inspecting what I expect with this person, right? And I guess somewhere probably I knew that, but like to hear him, talk about them earning the right, and it's like it's an hourly thing in the beginning, right? And then it's a daily and it's a weekly, and I realized like I didn't do that. I'm not doing that right now with that person. So for me, it's and they're all good, by the way, right?
Of course.
There wouldn't be fiduciary duties if you didn't need to do those things. But for me, it's inspecting what you expect. And it's the realization that if I would have made some of these tweaks earlier, I wouldn't be as far off, right? Because I could make that tweak. And yeah, I mean, that's really, really powerful. And again, I think it just hit me today because I've got somebody in this scenario where I haven't been a very good leader. And air quotes, the bad employees I've had in the past, right? There's kind of this like crushing sense of, Jesus, that was my fault, right? And I bet a few of you guys are thinking the same thing, like, I got a little bit of work to do myself, right?
Sure.
So that was my takeaway, is that I'm the reason for all the bad hires that I've made. It's not just this perfect storm of bad hires coming into my life,
Sure. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that one, Bob, as well as we wrap this up. Remember to subscribe wherever it is you take in your podcast from so that you get notified of our next episode as it shows up. On behalf of Bob and myself, we want to make sure to send you off, and remember each and every day to go out there and win, make, and give.